What's up guys, it's NLW here, back again with another video. This time, a brand new series I'm trying out for the first time, action figure setups. You may have seen them done on a few other channels before, but mine come with a twist. My setups come with a story attached, memories of wrestling, and for this first action figure setup, I'm recreating the landscape of WWE when I first got into wrestling. I would have been about 8 years old at the time. When I first started watching, it would have been shortly after Unforgiven 2006, I think that was in September. So I'm going to go through this whole thing, but firstly, let me know if you like the concept and want this to continue as a series by hitting that like button and commenting down below what you thought of the video. But without further ado, let's get into the setup. So let's start off over here on the left hand side. We've got the great Carl Lee. As a kid, this guy terrified me. He just gotten out of a feud with The Undertaker, I believe. And moving on, another scary individual, Viscera, although at this point in time, he was under his world's largest love machine gimmick, had the SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 game, and I always used to pick the big wrestlers, so I picked Viscera, and his finisher was quite something. If you Google that, he is trying to court, if you will, Mickie James. Mickie James, one of my favourite divas, as they used to call him back in the day. Now we move on to the Sandman from ECW. I used to love this guy, love the Singapore Cane. The fact that he came down from the ring, he made it cool before the Shield did, guys. And he was not the greatest wrestler in the world, but I just loved the entrance. I loved the music, even though in WWE, of course, it was just a cheap knockoff. I still enjoyed the Sandman as a wrestler. And now we come on to D-Generation X down here at the moment. They are attacking the McMahons, Triple H, pedigreeing Vince McMahon, and Shawn Michaels hitting a super kick on Shane McMahon. This was around the time they had wrapped up their rivalry with the McMahons, and I remember loving DX. I think it was a knockoff t-shirt, I'm not quite sure, but I had all the merch, I had the glow sticks, I had the DVDs, I had everything. Obviously, a lot of people say that their 2006 run was just a cash grab for merch, and to be honest, it worked. I mean, I bought all the merch, and as a kid, loved DX. They were my favourite act. Now moving on, another ECW moment, Hardcore Holly suplexing Rob Van Dam for a table, and if you don't remember what happened, this was an Extreme Rules match. I think it was around the time I started watching, might have been the first ever ECW exposure I got actually, and Hardcore Holly, his back got sliced open with the wood on the table. It required so many stitches. I've actually read his book and he talks about it, but man, it just looks so painful. In fact, I've got another story. Let's move on to Bobby Lashley, the ECW champion there. You can see him hoisting up the Big Show. Big Show, when I first started watching, he was the ECW champion, and I thought nothing of it. I didn't know what the original ECW was. All I knew was this version, and I thought it was cool at the time. This is homage to arguably the greatest pay-per-view of all time. Who can forget December to Dismember? Lashley winning the title. Not a lot of people liked it at the time. I did. I mean, I was a mark for anything that they put in front of me. I just gobbled it up. So if they were to push Lashley, dude, I was behind Lashley. I actually, back in the day, video recorded December to Dismember on Sky Sports, and I believe that my mum cancelled it upon reading the title Extreme Championship Wrestling. Obviously, in hindsight, there was nothing extreme about it, but I just think it's funny that she actually prevented me from seeing one of the worst pay-per-views of all time, so retrospectively, I've got to thank her for that. Now, going on to a SmackDown moment, Batista power bombing William Regal. At this time, they had the King's Court. King Booker was the World Heavyweight Champion. Batista had just come back from injury, trying to get the title back. And if you've read up anything about Batista and King Booker, you remember the infamous backstage fight at the SummerSlam 2006 commercial taping, I believe it was. So there was real life animosity between those two, and you see Finlay over there. I liked King Booker, I liked his shtick. In fact, it's the only wrestler that my dad can remember from today because of when I was watching as a kid. He had this King Booker, this terrible British accent that he was putting on. Brilliant character, and it was good to see him as the world champion back then. But obviously, I was rooting for my boy Batista. When he won the title at Survivor Series, me and my mate would watch that over and over again on DVD. And speaking of someone else, I was fully behind 100% John Cena. This is before where, you know what, I love John Cena. I did. I've got to admit it, and I've done a full 180, and I love him again. So, right here, he's got poor Shelton Benjamin up on his shoulders. Sorry, Spam Wrestling. I know he's your favourite wrestler. But Shelton Benjamin on the shoulders of John Cena. Cena was basically Super Cena at this point. He had the WWE Championship, and he held it for about a year. When I started watching, he didn't lose it until a year later in 2007 when he had to vacate it due to injury. And this is the man that picked up the ball and ran with it, Randy Orton. I wasn't a massive fan of Randy Orton back in the day. I thought it was boring, but that's because he was a heel and I was a kid, so it makes sense. Another person that I found despicable was Edge, and there you see him with Lita, that whole controversial angle with Matt Hardy stemming from the real life affair. And I just started watching, and one of the first things I remember from Raw was the formation of Team Rated RKO. when they came together, and I thought it was going to be the end of DX, honestly, when they started attacking them. I thought, man, this is so unfair. They're beating up DX, they're my favourite, so yeah, it was definitely a mark from the programming back then, but I did enjoy the matches between Team RKO and DX, even if it was short-lived because of Triple H's injury. But moving on, my favourite as a kid, no doubt, Jeff Hardy, and he's still my favourite to this day. At the moment, he's the Intercontinental Champion, and back then he was also the Intercontinental Champion. There you see he's on the ladder, and he's about to drop the Swanton on Johnny Nitro. When I first started watching, it was Nitro and Jeff Hardy having a feud between each other for the Intercontinental title, and I remember vividly, it was one of my favourite matches at the time, a ladder match, and there was actually another match they had, I think it was New Year's Revolution 2007, I recorded that pay-per-view, stayed up to watch it, and man, I loved it. Steel cage match, and you see down there Matt Hardy cheering on his brother. Man, I was mad for everything Jeff Hardy was doing. I was doing swantons off my sofa, everything. And as we move down the shot, just in front of the ladder, we see the Samoan bulldozer Umaga. Like the Great Khali before, Umaga terrified me as a kid. And when I was watching, he was in a feud with Kane. He made Kane leave Raw and go to SmackDown, and that's when I first started watching SmackDown as well. Kane and MVP and the Inferno match. But moving on, we've got JBL, John Bradshaw Layfield, checking over his notes because at this time he was the SmackDown commentator, and that voice of JBL really brings back memories of SmackDown at that time. I think back then he was better than he is now, but I did enjoy him and Michael Cole on commentary. They were probably my favourite commentary team at the time. No disrespect to JR and the King. And just behind him is the rabid Wolverine, Chris Benoit. I think it was the first ever SmackDown I watched. Chris Benoit won the United States Championship from Mr. Kennedy. And needless to say, I was about 9 years old when the whole Benoit incident went down in 2007. So I was devastated and I'm shocked when I recorded Raw the night before and I woke up to watch it and I was eating breakfast and it just came up with a graphic in memory of, and I was like, oh, my heart sank. It was horrible. And to learn what he did after as well was just horrific. But you know what? I got to admit, as a kid, loved him, loved his work. Moving on to someone I genuinely believed at the time could have been world champion, the Boogeyman. This guy didn't really scare me as a kid, more so just kind of creeped me out with the worms and stuff. I wasn't really digging the Boogeyman, not going to lie, even as a kid. Just the worms and all that stuff just disgusted me. But I do miss those wacky characters in wrestling. They need to bring more of them back, I think. Moving on, we've got The Undertaker delivering a tombstone pile driver to Mr. Kennedy. Kennedy pile drives him to the floor, and this is another feud I remember vividly. The Survivor Series match, the First Blood match, cracked the chair over The Undertaker's head. And when he won Money in the Bank, I was... well, at the time, I hated the heels and loved the faces, so I wasn't happy to see it. Kennedy definitely did not reach his potential in WWE, it goes without saying, but the feud with The Undertaker, very much enjoyed it, especially that last Ride match. And now finally moving on to something that devastated me as a child, the I Quit match between Chavo Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. I'd only just gotten into wrestling at this point. I remember seeing an ad for No Mercy 2006 for Sky Box Office, and I begged my parents to get it for me. They did not, but there was a Falls Count Anywhere match on that show between Chavo and Rey. Loved that match. And then, it might have been the following SmackDown, Rey Mysterio and Chavo Guerrero having that I Quit match, and Chavo Guerrero busting the knee of Rey Mysterio, and I was so worried for Rey at the time, being a massive Rey Mysterio fan early on. And it's a shame, I only just got into wrestling, and then Rey Mysterio has to go away for a long period of time. It sucked, but I remember despising Chavo Guerrero. But yeah, those are just some of my first memories of wrestling. Like I said back then, 2006, 8 years old, I was having the time of my life looking up all these classic matches and stuff. I even made my own custom belts out of paper, playing SmackDown vs Raw 2007 over and over again. Yeah, just such a sense of nostalgia associated with that time as a wrestling fan, but obviously if I look back now, probably won't be as good as I remember it being. And that's a wrap for 2006. Like I said, just putting this whole thing together made me reminisce, memories flooding back of watching this time period. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button, it really helps the channel. Also, if you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button as we're trying to edge closer to 30,000 subs, and make sure you turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Also leave a comment, I love reading through. When did you guys first get into wrestling? What are your first memories of it? Leave suggestions as well for future setups in the comments. In fact, I say that, if you head over to my Patreon, the link is in the description. For any tier above $3, you get to request a setup for me to do, and I'll give you a shout out during that video, so do go and check that out if you're interested. Like I said, hope you guys enjoyed this setup. Comment what are your favourite memories of wrestling, what are your earliest memories of wrestling, when did you get into it, how long have you been a fan? Hope you enjoyed the setup, and I'll catch you guys later.